1860, Bismarck of Prussia wanted to guarantee French neutrality during the Austro-Prussian War, so he promised Napoleon III Luxembourg, which was then in a personal union with the Dutch and in the German customs union. However, when the war ended, Napoleon III tried to buy Luxembourg, but Bismarck objected. So to avoid a war on the issue, the great powers met in London in 1867 and decided that Luxembourg would remain part of the German customs union but would become a neutral nation, and to ensure this neutrality they demolished large sections of the fort. Construction of the fort apparently cost 1.5 million francs, took 15 years and was a pretty chaotic affair, with the civilians taking a lot of stones for themselves. And there's a good reason why it took so long, and that's because Luxembourg was a heavily fortified city and was called the Gibraltar of the North. The reason it was so heavily fortified was because Luxembourg throughout its history was wedged between powerful nations like the Netherlands, France and Germany, and it was occupied a lot of times by the Spanish, the French, the Austrians, etc., and each nation added to the defences. To give you one example, the Spanish in the 17th century added to the fortifications in order to defend against Louis XIV of France. So in many ways, Luxembourg was sort of a fort for foreign nations. The Austrians, for instance, didn't allow anybody to build or farm a few hundred meters from the fort in order so that their view was unobstructed. However, this meant that a lot of agricultural land was lost and a sort of no man's land existed. Plus, starting in the 17th century, gates began to be destroyed in order to improve the defences. This meant that travel in and out of the city became increasingly hard and trade suffered as a result of this. Plus, a curfew was imposed, and anybody who was outside of the fortifications after a certain point was stuck out there for the rest of the night. In fact, this fear of being locked outside at night may have developed a local story about St. Nicholas or Santa, and that's because he is said to have saved some children from a butcher who was planning on killing them after offering them lodgings at night. And the city would often house thousands of foreign soldiers and their animals, but in 1679 at least there were only a couple hundred houses, so the civilians would have to live alongside the soldiers and their animals all the time, and one magistrate complained that the soldiers were often drunk and stole from the locals. Although some barracks were built in the late 17th and early 18th century, there were many civilians and soldiers who lived within the fortifications themselves, and those who did get homes, well, the soldiers that got homes got them free of charge because all civilians had to provide the foreign soldiers with lodging, so conditions were pretty squalid and cramped. In the 19th century, when Luxembourg was forced to destroy its fortifications, this may have been seen as a loss of defence or a national monument or something like that, but it allowed the city to grow and expand and people's living conditions to improve a great deal.